Amara Lewis adjusted the cuff of her navy blazer as she stepped through the crowded terminal. Heads turned as she walked by, not just because of her striking presence, but because she radiated the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth. At 38, she wasn't just another business traveler. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country, a self-made powerhouse who had shattered every glass ceiling in her path. And yet, here she was, clutching an economy-class boarding pass. Amara hated unnecessary drama. She'd spent her entire career proving people wrong without ever needing to raise her voice. But this was a slap in the face. She had booked a first-class ticket weeks ago, as she always did for cross-country flights. Her schedule was grueling, and those few hours of quiet in a reclining seat were her only chance to breathe. But when she checked in, the agent casually handed her an economy ticket with a forced smile and a mumbled excuse. "Sorry, first class is full." She knew what that meant. She'd seen the glances, the subtle tone. It wasn't the first time someone had looked at her, a black woman in a tailored suit, and assumed she didn't belong up front. But this time, it wasn't just ignorance. It was disrespect. She paid for that seat. She had the receipt. Yet here she was, walking down the narrow aisle of the plane, past leather seats that should have been hers, settling into a cramped row in the back. Amara took a slow breath and placed her laptop bag under the seat. The man next to her, already spread out with his elbows taking up half the armrest, barely looked her way. She opened her phone and stared at her calendar. Back-to-back meetings, investor calls, a major product launch in 3 days. And now this. Her jaw tightened. She could let it slide. She could swallow the insult like so many before it. But as the flight attendant closed the overhead bin and the captain's voice came over the intercom, Amara's phone buzzed with a familiar name. She hesitated for half a second, then answered. "Amara, tell me you're on the plane," the voice on the other end said. It was David, her chief operating officer. Reliable, steady, the one who handled problems before they reached her desk. Except this time, the problem was her. "I'm here," she replied, keeping her tone even as she stared at the seatback in front of her. "But not where I should be." "What do you mean?" "Economy," she said flatly. There was a long pause, followed by an incredulous laugh. "You're kidding. I wish I were." She glanced toward the curtain that separated her from first class. She could see a man in a crisp suit sipping champagne, in what was supposed to be her seat. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "They overbooked and bumped me down. Claimed there was nothing they could do." "Nothing they could do." David's voice sharpened. "For the CEO who owns 12% of the airline's biggest tech supplier." Amara smiled faintly despite herself. Apparently not. But the truth was, this wasn't just about a seat. It was about principle, about the assumptions people made the second they saw her. Too young, too black, too female. She'd fought those stereotypes in boardrooms for years, but here, at 30,000 feet, it felt personal. The plane doors sealed with a hollow thud. Flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Amara tried to focus on her breathing, tried to let it go. She even opened her tablet, attempting to review her presentation for tomorrow. But she couldn't shake the tightness in her chest, not just from anger, but from a gnawing feeling she couldn't quite name. Something felt off. The man next to her kept glancing at her screen, his body angled too far into her space. A few rows ahead, a flight attendant whispered to the purser, both of them glancing toward the back of the plane, toward her. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but the look on their faces wasn't friendly. Amara's instincts had kept her alive in business, and right now, every one of them screamed, "This isn't just about a seat." David's voice broke her thoughts. "Amara, do you want me to handle this?" She stared at the glowing airplane mode prompt on her phone screen. Her finger hovered over it. "No," she said slowly. "I'll handle it myself." And with that, she dialed a different number. Amara scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she needed. Not David, not her assistant, not even her legal team. This was bigger than that. She tapped the number and lifted the phone to her ear, speaking in a calm, almost casual tone when the line picked up. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but cool. "It's Amara." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Amara Lewis. Wow, it's been a while. What can I'm on flight 627, en route to New York," she cut in. "Booked in first class, confirmed. They bumped me to economy." Silence. Then, cautiously, "That shouldn't happen." "No, Ethan," she said, her voice dropping, "it can't happen." And yet, Here I am. Seat 32B. Ethan Price wasn't just anyone. He was the vice president of operations for the airline, and an old business contact who once spent 3 months begging Amara's company for a contract. She had delivered then, and now, she was cashing in that favor. I'm sitting here watching someone else sip champagne in a seat I paid for, she continued. This isn't just a mistake. It's an insult. Fix it. Ethan's tone changed instantly. Give me 5 minutes. Amara ended the call, her expression unreadable. Around her, the cabin buzzed with idle chatter. No one had a clue that the woman in 32B had just set something in motion that would ripple all the way to the top. 5 minutes later, the purser reappeared, moving briskly down the aisle. His eyes darted from the manifest to Amara's seat, and then to his phone, which buzzed in his hand. He froze mid-step, turned on his heel, and hurried back toward the front of the plane. Then came the captain's voice, calm but firm, cutting through the cabin noise. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unexpected operational matter, we'll be returning to the gate before departure. Please remain seated. Heads turned. Groans rippled through the rows. Passengers muttered about delays. Amara said nothing. She just closed her eyes and took a slow breath as the engines began to power down. That call, it had just grounded the entire flight. The collective frustration in the cabin grew like a storm. People were checking their watches, muttering under their breath, and furiously typing on their phones before the Wi-Fi cut off. Flight attendants moved quickly up and down the aisle, their professional smiles stretched tight over nervous expressions. Amara sat perfectly still in 32B, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't need to check her phone to know Ethan was already making calls of his own. When a VP promised 5 minutes, he meant 5 minutes. From the corner of her eye, she saw a businessman in the aisle seat lean toward her, his voice low and conspiratorial. Any idea what's going on? Amara didn't even glance at him. I'm sure they'll make an announcement soon, she said smoothly. Truth was, she knew exactly what was going on, and so did the purser, who had now disappeared into the cockpit with a face like someone who'd just been handed an impossible order. The engines went silent. A hush fell over the cabin as the plane slowly began to taxi back toward the gate. Someone behind her groaned loudly. Another passenger stood up, demanding to know why they were turning around. A flight attendant intercepted him with a soothing but vague response. Just a quick operational delay, sir. We appreciate your patience. Amara allowed herself the faintest smile. Operational delay, she repeated in her head. That was one way to put it. But then, something strange happened. As the aircraft came to a stop on the tarmac, she noticed 2 security officers approaching through the jet bridge, visible through the small window by the exit row. They weren't here for an unruly passenger. The mood in the cabin hadn't been chaotic enough for that. They were here for something else. The murmurs grew louder as the captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're addressing a situation that requires immediate attention before we can continue. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. The businessman next to her exhaled sharply. This can't be good. Amara didn't answer. Her phone buzzed once, then again. A single text from Ethan appeared on her screen. It's handled. They'll be speaking to you shortly. Handled. She wasn't so sure, because the look on those security officers' faces didn't say apology. It said something bigger was coming. The cabin was a hive of speculation now. Passengers whispered theories like wildfire, a mechanical failure, a bomb threat, an unruly passenger. None of them guessed the truth. Amara kept her eyes forward, her pulse steady, as the security officers stepped onto the plane. Their boots made a dull thud against the aisle carpet, drawing every eye in the cabin. One of them, tall and imposing, carried a folder tucked under his arm. They walked past row after row until they stopped right beside Amara's seat. Ms. Lewis, the taller officer said, his voice even but authoritative. Dozens of heads swiveled toward her. The businessman next to her stiffened, his eyes wide. Yes, Amara replied, her voice calm, but her mind sharp, cataloging every detail. Could you come with us, please? The words hung in the air like a blade. Passengers started murmuring louder now. Someone pulled out a phone, trying to film discreetly. Amara tilted her head slightly. Is there a reason, sir? The officer said, glancing at the businessman. We'll need you to move. Before she could press further, the purser appeared, pale and visibly shaken. He leaned in and whispered something to the officer, then turned to Amara with a strained smile. Ms. Lewis, he said softly, "We deeply apologize for the inconvenience. There's been a misunderstanding. We'd like to escort you to the front. Front, as in first class, or..." The officer stepped aside, making room for her in the aisle. Amara rose slowly, feeling every stare burn into her back. She picked up her laptop bag with deliberate grace and followed the men toward the front of the plane. When the curtain parted, she froze. First class was empty, completely empty. The champagne glasses, the glossy magazines, untouched. And then she saw it. The captain standing outside the cockpit, cap in hand, looking as if he'd just been told the president was aboard. "Ms. Lewis," he said, his voice hushed with respect, "on behalf of the airline, please accept our sincerest apologies. Your original seat is ready. And, the plane won't depart until you're satisfied." The murmurs from economy grew louder, but Amara didn't turn around. She slid into her seat, stretched her legs, and let out a long, slow breath. One call. That's all it took. Behind her, the plane stayed grounded for another 45 minutes, because when you're a woman who built an empire, the sky bends to your will.